There we go. Welcome back to the Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's a Wednesday afternoon, and I am delighted, genuinely, to be joined by Patrick McGulp and John Hughes. Loads to discuss, gentlemen. But I'm going to ask you one word from each of you. Describe in one word, Patrick McGulp, Celtic's transfer window thus far.
God, that's a tough one.
It's a tough one to keep it clean, isn't it?
Unfinished, I'll go for. I think that's
Oh,
me being
yes.
hopeful there. Unfinished.
There's a wee positive twist to that, John. Do you want to add to that? Have you got a one word pre-watershed that you can use to describe this transfer window?
Expected.
Yes. We've come to expect the slow, laborious movements of the sloth, which is the Celtic board. I tell you what, that really it was so inevitable was that story that just broke in the last hour or so in relation to Matt O'Reilly. John, at first we heard that Girona were interested. We discussed that interest. People kept reminding us they're not a big spending club. They're never going to meet our valuation, etc. But it was inevitable that someone else within that league. There was talk of a La Liga side being interested. Atletico Madrid have joined the race and apparently have made a formal bid for Matt O'Reilly. What do you make of all that chat?
It's deeply, deeply concerning. Atletico are a big club. Let's be honest, they are a big outfit, exactly the kind of club that Matt O'Reilly wants to get himself off to at some point. However, there's a number of things in our favour. So he's literally only just signed a new deal. He's quite happy where he is. He'll be interested in that deal. But, again, the club, you're looking at a loan with an option to buy, which, as Patrick's just pointed out as we were chatting there, must be something to do with the FFP regulations. Just stealing your thunder there, Patrick, because that was something intelligent you said.
I was going to do it if you didn't, John.
That's my 1 point of intelligence. You've stolen it from
me. So, it's a massive, deal for us. But in terms of a loan deal with an option to buy is of no interest to us at all. We have a league to win. And even if we got 30 million for him, how much are the board going to spend on a replacement? Where are we going to find a replacement for him? He is instrumental. I'm trying to think of a goal that he hasn't set up recently. He's absolutely instrumental in everything going through that midfield. He is, our most influential player by a country mile in terms of creativity. So the notion that we would even contemplate, I couldn't give a monkey's what bid they've offered. I wouldn't care if they'd offered 50 million. I would still say no, because you're gambling on the season, the whole season. So instead of getting 3 or 4 players in, as Brendan has asked for, what we're going to sell our best player in this window and replace him with what exactly? What we're going to replace him with? Someone as good as Matt O'Reilly, you can be 100% sure that won't be the case.
No.
So, rather than coming in out of the window stronger, we come out significantly weaker with a league on the line, with our opposition apparently strengthening, although, you never know when their stories are concerned because it always seems to be made up. But, it does seem as if they're still trying something. So, look, it's worrying just because our board is who the board is. But as you said, kick it into the long grass. I don't think the long grass is far enough. If there was long grass on Mars, that's how far you should be kicking it. That's just not even to be contemplated at this point for me.
No. And you know what, John? I don't think there's anybody in the comments section who would disagree. Let us know your thoughts on this. There's an air of inevitability about it, Patrick. We knew that the big clubs would be circling like vultures. There has been some talk around Matt O'Reilly, Cameron Carter-Vickers and Lee Labada. We'll talk about all 3 of them. But you know what, as John said, we're going for this title. Every title is important, but there is a different hue to this one when you look at the Champions League riches, not just for Celtic. We are a wealthy club. This is, again, another frustration that it's not about just emptying your bank account, but let's be realistic and say, well, if you're going to add quality, that comes at a price. We don't seem prepared to pay that price. And then at the end of this season, if we don't and someone else does, i.e. our main title challengers, Rangers, wins the league and taps into this bounty, then everything changes, Patrick. It's, you're looking at Celtic winning the league this season and then you are setting yourself up technically for the next decade when it comes to financial dominance of Scottish football. Whatever Rangers throw at it, they're going to get the crumbs from the table at the end of the season if they don't win the league. Yet our top players, our star players, are being linked with other clubs. We're getting bids from other clubs. And I don't feel 100% confident as a Celtic fan that the board see it the way we do, Patrick.
No, because it really is. It's in the balance. That's the best way to describe it. Because if they win their games in hands, they'll be favourites to do so. We'll only be 2 points ahead. You've still got, I think, 16 games to play. We've obviously struggled. Heading into the winter break, finished well, playing good football the last 3 or 4 games. Obviously done well against Bucky Thistle, but they're a sort of obviously a much smaller team. But yeah, I mean, you just can't be selling your key players this window. I mean, you get to the summer, you can reassess. You've got 2 months to sort of reorganise. You've got the Champions League money, hopefully, and you can. It's an easier window if you want to call it that. But we needed 2 first-team players net, not just 2 players. We needed them net to add to this existing squad. So the concept of getting rid of 1 or maybe even 2 players in O'Reilly and Abada, and then having to bring in 3 or 4 within the next 6-7 days. I mean, it's not possible. You're not getting players of quality in that time. There's just no way. John makes a good point as well. Even if they're offering money, you're then trusting Mark Lawwell to go and sign a quality centre midfielder in the space of 7 days. And I mean, more money helps, but it's a massive, massive gamble that we cannot afford to take, because if we sell him, we risk losing the league, and the league, as we know, is worth in excess of 50 million this season with the new Champions League format. So, you might cost yourself a couple of million by not selling them right now and wait until the summer. But if you win the league and then sell them, you're getting more money overall. You just need to keep a hold of your players for the next 8 days, bring in a few more bodies, and give yourself the best possible chance, because we can all see how important this is, apart from the guys who are responsible for signing the players. You can understand the Abada situation with everything that's going on the last 4 months, but just keep the squad together for the second half of this season, win the league, and then, hopefully we've got our recruitment in order by then, and we can rebuild the squad properly, like we should have done in the summer, but we made an absolute pig's ear of it. So, we can't be affording to sell any players at this stage.
No, you're right. And loads of great comments coming in. I'm really keen to get your thoughts on all things Celtic, interest in some of our top players. And I think if there was a poll right now as to who is the key player at Celtic Football Club, Matt O'Reilly would be on top of the list. And that is unthinkable. I've used that word a few times. Unthinkable that Matt would leave in this window. Jungle Lion, you're coming in on the YouTube channel to say the board has to stay strong. Yes. This is the thing, John. You want that to happen. Everybody in the comments wants it to happen. But there is just this niggling doubt in your mind, isn't it? Or is it even bigger than a niggling doubt? It's like they just can't help themselves at times. We don't need the money. The player's on a long-term contract. He's not going to decrease in value between now and the end of the season. What would be the point in putting everything at risk by selling Matt O'Reilly? I'm going to ask you straight out, John. Do you honestly think the board are that daft?
Yes. No, I mean, there's no question in my mind that they're that daft. They will just think that Brendan's got enough resources there and he should just crack on, get it done. Sure isn't Bernardo playing well? And, didn't home turn up and play the other day, and Iwata's coming back from injury. Yeah, I mean, I see a comment there about release clauses and contracts as well. I've never heard of one of our players having a release clause, so unless it's for like 100 million quid, which will never be triggered, I've never heard of such a thing. If someone wants to tell me that's different, I think that's very unusual in Scottish contracts, because we're not usually in line for bids. It's just not something I've ever heard of in a contract from a player in this league. If someone wants to correct me on that, I'm happy to be corrected, but I just don't see it. I doubt very much he's got a release contract, a release clause, and a specific number. I mean, could they possibly do it? Yeah. you know, I mean, we know that what the board have done over a period of decades at this point. You know, the bad decisions they've made when there was a plethora of good decisions that could have been made. So, you know, you don't want to slaughter the board as a group, but at the end of the day, it's not really a big group, because it really only is Michael Nicholson, who's essentially, you know, taking instruction really from Peter Lawwell, and Mark Lowell's not even on the board, so it's not really anything to do with him, apart from the fact we'd be expecting him, as you both pointed out, to sign world-class players inside 6 days. And we haven't, we can't even get half-decent players in months, in absolutely months. So, no, there's no question in my mind he wouldn't be replaced either. So, no, it would be, for me, catastrophic. But you asked me the question, would the board do it? And I don't think there's any doubt they would.
This is a concern, and I want to hear everybody's comments on this, because I do think they come from a school of thought, Patrick, that you've got a player in Matt O'Reilly, and, you know, we signed them for a small fee, and we're going to make something bizarre in terms of the percentage of profit on that fee if we were to sell them. So they see that as good business. They then say, we've got this kid called Bernardo that's in on loan, and, you know, he's coming along a treat and we'll be able to turn that. So they actually see this as progress, almost as part of the strategy. Whereas football fans, we're looking at the situation that we're in at the moment. It's been an up and down, topsy-turvy style season in terms of the form. But it looks as though we're starting to get a bit of momentum. And I don't mean Bucky. I'm talking the last 5 games. It looks as though we're getting into a flow, we're getting into a momentum. Brendan Rodgers has squeezed as much, I think, as he can out of that transfer window in the summer for players that maybe didn't have his fingerprints on it. But he seems to have got a few good players that he can use and utilise right now, maybe 2 or 3. And then there's a few others that might come into the equation in the future. Bernardo, Nawrocki, Louis Palmer are guys that I would expect to appear in the second half of this season. So Rodgers has decided they're good enough quality. The rest of them might go out on loan or might not be in his plans. But to lose the keystone in that kind of turnaround in the form, you look at his 29 games this season, 10 goals, 12 assists from midfield, 22 and 29 for a midfield player. You remove that out of the team and we're not going to replace it. As John says, we're not even able to bolster the current situation, never mind replace one of the star men. I asked John if they were daft enough to do it. There's a few comments saying maybe not daft enough, but greedy enough. Patrick, it's unthinkable, right? It's not going to happen, is it?
You would hope not. You would hope not. Not for a loan anyway. You know, I think the thinking seems to be that Bernardo's going to be the replacement come the summer, and maybe if they got a bit greedy and Atletico offered them the money now, I think they might consider it if that was to happen. I don't think we'll go for a loan. You know, even to even give the board some credit, you know, they like the cash up front. I mean, you've seen that with the Tierney transfer saga a few years ago. They've got a price in their head and they're going to stick to that. To get rid of him now, I mean, Bernardo's been playing well for, 4 or 5 games? I mean, he's been in and out the squad throughout the season, played in Europe and stuff, but I mean, it's only really the last 4 games that he's really kicked on. And, you know, I just don't think that he's definitely the replacement yet. I mean, you're not going to replace those sorts of numbers for O'Reilly because it's just a wonderful season he's been having. It's like trying to replace Jota. You're just not going to be able to do it. But to try and replace that in the midfield, you know, the next 4 or 5 months will tell if Bernardo's that player. But surely they wouldn't be daft enough to sell him now. I mean, you know, as we're all just sitting here discussing, he's going to go for a record fee. I think Fabrizio Romano said that in late October, early November. So 25, 30 million, that's brilliant. But you've only got the 7 days to replace him. And you need to factor that into the equation. And it just can't be allowed to happen.
I just say, Paul, sorry, because I'm looking at comments here. Just to clarify, the story is loan with an obligation to buy.
Yeah.
It's not just a loan from, you know, to the end of the season or anything, loan with an obligation to buy. And that's why we're saying it'll be to do with financial fair play, because they want to kick it into a different financial year kick it down the road to that extent. Don't know what the fee is that's been talked about, though. I'd like to know what that is first before we make a decision on what the board might do. Because I don't think for 25-30 million they would consider it. But if it's serious, if it's big numbers more than that, I don't think there's any doubt they would look at it.
No, and it's this big momentum swing again. You come out of this transfer window. Yes, it's been disappointing. John said it was expected. Some might use one word, saying it's been brutal so far, underwhelming. I've seen coming up in the comment section. But then to add insult to injury, it would just be one of our stand men leaving. So it simply cannot happen the way that I'm looking at it this season. We need to keep as much strength and power as we possibly can. We've got a few players coming back from injury who haven't really featured in the first half of the season, and guys like Abada and Hatate, the old cliche, they're going to be like new signings, all that kind of stuff's going to get rolled out. We'll get Vata on a long-term deal, and the last day will be unveiled like a new signing, and it's going to be that kind of transfer window. That's the way it's going at the moment. Giggsy the Poet, aka the poet formerly known as Kevin Graham, is coming in on the comments. In the world of the boards that we have, interest in CCV, Abada and MOR shows that the recruitment is working. Yeah, that's what was meaning. I mean, the fact that we've brought players in at a price and they're gaining interest at bigger prices, which equals profit. In their mind, they think that the strategy is working. We've also got Stephen Loudon coming in. If Matt wants to go, sell him now and get proper replacements in pronto. That's the problem. There's no chance. There is no chance. And I think Jota is a perfect example to use, Patrick, right? The loss of Jota has been a massive reason for the first half of our season, and the way that it's taken us so long to get a tune out of Kyogo, for example. You lose, Jota on one side, you lose the goal contribution, both assists and goal scored from Abada, for example, through injury. And you lose that from both your wingers, and it's massive. It's huge, and that's a huge reason why Kyogo's not been as prolific. It's a huge reason why we've not been as dangerous and as high tempo when going forward and aggressive in our play. That shows you what can happen if you lose one of your star men. And the same impact could happen in the second half of the season. So, even if you were to get an unbelievable offer, it's not worth it, because there's no chance we're going to replace Matt O'Reilly and the impact that Matt O'Reilly has made this season.
If you want to talk about genuinely stupid stories, Abada on loan, just a loan, no obligation for anything, not even an option to buy, just a loan.
Yep. And now this is a story that's been rumbling on for a few weeks now, John. And you give credence. You are able to ignore a lot of the nonsense you see appearing in news stories, particularly in this day and age where it's all about the clickbait. But then you give credence to certain sources, like the source today. It's Anthony Joseph, isn't it, on the Matt O'Reilly story. The source for the Lila Bada story is Stephen McGowan. And these two guys are credible. They've come up with the goods before. When they write, you tend to listen, if that makes sense. Aye. We'll run with it. We'll run with it anyway, John. There's a lot of things not making sense today. Lila Bada, again, what I was looking at this morning was get him out on loan to get him out of the situation for a spell, then he can come back. Nonsense, Patrick. Nonsense. The situation has been the same for decades. Celtic's state of mind in terms of the fan base politically isn't going to change. He's going to walk back into the same situation. I don't buy it in the slightest. What teams are we talking? West Brom, Southampton are interested in him. There's interest from the League One in France, from the Bundesliga. What do you make of the Lila Bada situation, Patrick?
Much the same as O'Reilly, really. I mean, we're in such a crucial point, just from a Celtic point of view. I mean, you can take Abada's point of view, but, we're all Celtic fans. We're looking at this from a Celtic point of view, a Celtic state of mind, if you will. You need to think about it doesn't benefit us in the slightest. The idea is going to be he's going to come back in 5-6 months, and suddenly, Israel and Palestine are going to be best pals, and the Green Brigade aren't going to talk about it. I mean, that's just nonsense. From a Celtic point of view, if he's going to leave, he's going to have to leave for money. And, he's not played a massive part in the season. In fairness, this isn't a reason to sell him by any stretch, but I think he went off injured against Rangers at Ibrox, and his first game back was the week before he played Rangers at Parkhead. So he's not played a massive amount of football. So if you get money from, it's actually not the worst deal in the world. But loans, I just wouldn't be entertaining at all. I think that's just another, club's chancing their arm, whether it's FFP or whether they're seeing an opportunity there with the sort of Israel-Palestine thing. But I wouldn't be going for that at all. I hope he sort of kicks on. I hope he eventually moves on for a big fee. But if he wants to leave, I mean, he's not screaming and shouting. That's one thing. I think this has been, misrepresented in certain parts of the media, and the Israeli manager and stuff. Abada's never actually come out and said he's unhappy or wants to leave or complained in any way about the fans. So there's no pressure on us to sell him. We can still command a high fee. We're in no rush to get rid of the guy. So maybe we've promised him a move at some point this season, whether it be January or the end of the season. But there's no sort of external pressure that we have to take a low bid. So as long as we replace him, get some money in, I've got no problems with him leaving, but it can't be for a loan, and I wouldn't really like it to be this window either.
Someone is feeding that narrative, though.
Yeah,
that's coming from somewhere within the club. Of that, there is no doubt.
Because Stephen McGowan's talking about it.
Yeah, well, exactly. So essentially, again, you don't want to be too harsh, but I mean, as I said last week, the whole thing about the reasons for him going, to me, is just nonsense. It boils down to just suck it up, buttercup. I mean, that's really it. Because, as I said last week, how many of our, English and foreign first team, you think are big supporters of Irish republicanism and the armed conflict? Do you think they're all about their how many Catholic players playing for Rangers? How do you square that circle? Do you think they're loving their fans every minute of every game? You're there to do a job. I said it last week. You're there to do a job. You've just got to do the job. You're not always going to agree with, if it doesn't matter if you go to, Man United, or it doesn't matter where you go. The crowd anywhere you go with that number of people is going to have murderers and rapists and, all sorts of vile human beings in it. What, you think you're going to agree with them all? It's just absolute madness to think that that's the case. You pick your club based on who gives you the best opportunity to achieve what you want to achieve in the football, not what fan groups you like or don't like. Are they providing you the opportunity to win silverware, to progress yourself, to get your career where you want to get it? And if it's not that, then you're delusional if you think you're just going to move until you find a bunch of cuddly fans all of whose politics you agree with, because it's not personal. As we also said last week, the reason Abada probably hasn't complained is because no one's given Abada a hard time. He hasn't had any personal abuse, at all. If anything, the fans are right behind him, as was demonstrated when he came on. They're supporting the boy because they know it might be a difficult emotional time for him. But that's not. You don't make professional moves based on feelings in a moment. So fair enough. It's obviously not an easy thing, but at the same time, you've got a job to do. If we were sitting in an office and we felt one way or another about a political situation, there's a march going past outside the window, would you refuse to work in the office? So we don't have that option. And at the same, I'm not suggesting modern players are mollycoddled and pandered to, but there is an element of just go on with your job, son.
The thing with Abada, John, is when I look at him as a footballer coming in the age that he came in, I would have expected the trajectory to result in this season being his big season for us. And when Brendan Rodgers came in, I felt that was going to add to that belief that this season was going to be the one where he really excelled. It's not worked out for him so far. And even when he's come back, obviously, I think it's going to take him a while to get back to some kind of sharpness. But the thing with Abada as well, you're talking about the narrative. I think that's all joined up, because what underneath the Abada situation and the speculation we have is the fact that we've bought one player in this transfer window, and it's a winger, right? Which I've got to say I don't think we needed, right? But hopefully he's a good signing. And then you've got Mikey Johnston, could well be on his way to West Bromwich Albion. Rocco Vata comes out from the cold unexpectedly against Bucky Thistle, albeit in a perfectly matched game for him, because that's his kind of level that he's been playing at this season. And I just think it all adds up to a potential departure for Abad. I think it's a nonsense that we're talking about alone, because as you say, Patrick, the state of mind is going to be exactly the same if he comes back in 6 months. I also don't think it's going to add to what you've seen as a natural progression in Abada's career if he was to go and play 6 months down south or whatever. I don't think that's going to, improve him as a player, improve his value. I think for the next 6 months, he'd be better off, working under Brendan Rodgers and learning his trade. But I do have a slight concern in that we brought in another winger for a decent fee. And we've reintroduced Rocco Vata into the squad. And I want to talk about his old man's interview and whether or not you thought that was badly advised, ill-advised, or actually pretty good. I said there was a lot of sense in it yesterday when I commented on it. But it is, the winger is a talking point, Patrick, because A, we've got far too many of them. B, we've just added to that list. C, we've got Said Haksabanovic coming back to add to it even further. And D, because I'm running out of letters here, I know there's 20. I know there's 26, but I won't bore you. We've got the Abada situation. So wrapped all up in one discussion, I think there might be some credence to the fact that Abada could be on his way.
I mean, I think the situation with the wingers, I don't know how either of you feel about this, but my view is that we've got hundreds of them and none of them are any good.
Could we say millions? Millions of wingers?
Aye, millions. It's getting close to that figure. I thought Haksabanovic was a bit of a player when he first came in. I thought he had a lot of skill. Never has really shown any real end product. I mean, the amount of times he has been one-on-one with a Rangers goalkeeper and put it just past the post. I mean, it happened about 3 times in one game, I think. He's just not get the final product needed for Celtic, I don't think. Maeda does a job, but I mean, is he really the top level winger that you're really striving for? Personally, not for me. I mean, the amount of times he puts it into Rose Ed is sort of comical almost. Abada, obviously, you've got a unique situation there. He has struggled with injuries. He's not started a lot in the last 18 months. Could be on his way out. And then guys like Mikey Johnson, James Forrest. I mean, these are 2 guys. I think they've both got 18 months left. I can't see Forrest moving on. Maybe Mikey Johnson will, but what are they guys going to contribute in the next 18 months? Absolutely nothing. Nothing. I mean, Forrest, it was basically like a retirement deal he got. I mean, he's not really done anything since he scored in the League Cup semi-final against St Johnstone 2 years ago. Mikey Johnson obviously needs moved on. Another issue really with the transfer window, we've not moved on enough players. I mean, You could easily name. I mean, me and John were struggling to come up with maybe 10, 12 names, but you could easily name 5 or 6 players that you need to move on, and we've not done it.
No, to be fair, Patrick, to be fair though, we both got it down by 10. Sorry, folks, just in case you don't know, we're just doing a wee exercise because Kevin Graham mentioned last week about folk running with a squad of 18. And I'd said last week when it was mentioned that we'd be able to knock 10 off that list, straight away, and then you're arguing over about the last 3. And that's pretty much exactly as it's turned out. From a squad of 31 as I had it, you can get shot at 10 of them fairly handy. Although I think Patrick's cheating because he's got no goalies left. But where it does fall down at the end is you can't really lose any more from the defence. You can't really lose any more from the midfield. But you could lose more up front. But we've got so many inconsistent players. We've got no consistency up front. So you're scared to cut those bodies because you're thinking, well, I mean, he only does a job once every couple of games or once every 3 games. So you're actually looking at the squad. I'd suggest everyone has a go at this. See if you can get it down to 18, because we can get it down to 21, but then you're looking at, what, do you let O go? And then you've got Palma and Maeda, and do you let Maeda go? And, so it's difficult, and it just shows you, for me, the thing it really highlights is we have no consistency up front, and we have only one player of undoubted quality. And I know that's not where this conversation was going, but it really did highlight the fact that we need more body. The need to have all these bodies up front is because Kyogo's the only one you can rely on. So I don't know. I don't know what that means in terms of where we're going in this transfer window, because clearly there's a whole load of people there we should be getting shoved, but it's not going to be easy because a lot of them are on very long-term deals, and we've had that discussion before. It is that the club are taking all the risk, they're assuming all the risk by handing out these 5-year contracts, and this is what happens if you don't manage that situation properly. These people have to be aggressively moved on if at all possible. I don't think you're allowed to have them training with the B team or whatever, but they need to be made to move one way or another, because we can't be carrying squads of 32 people when it's so easy just to knock off 10 of them and say we don't need those guys at all. And then the only reason that there's a conversation about the other 3 is because we've got no quality up front apart from Kyogo. So, yeah, no, it's a difficult one. I mean, you look at, that game against Bucky Thistle, sorry, I know you've had lots of conversations about this. The thing that really struck me in the first 20 minutes or so was neither Palmer or Abada trying to hit the byline against Highland League defenders. Mm-hmm. And you're like, for the love of God, what are you doing? Go past the man. Yeah. If he had pace, he wouldn't be playing in the Highland League. Get past him. Hit the byline. If you can't hit the byline against those lads, and it took them like 25 minutes, half an hour to work it out. And it's just, it was just fairly illustrative of the issue we have at the moment. As you boys have just pointed out, we've got a ton of wingers and none of them are particularly good.
No, you're right. And I think we've been speaking about what to do with the squad. It's going to take much more than one transfer window. But even at that, John, I would have expected more departures. I know that at the end of the transfer window, there's a glut of players leaving the club and stuff. I get that. But, there's no planning, is there, in bringing a player like Kwon in? I said this the other day. This was not part of the plan 6 months down the line to loan him out. If that was part of the plan, we would have bought him and loaned him out right off the bat. It's the same with Tilio. If Tilio ends up going back to Australia, then the transfer's failed. If he goes back to Australia on loan, that's because it's no worked. So there's 2 players that you can almost score off. And I know Kwon played well for St Mirren, man of the match in the game. Hope he turns it on when he's playing against Rangers. I get all the benefits of putting guys out in Scotland, Montgomery, of course, and Motherwell. But we've not been doing it aggressively enough. I think that what John says is right. You want all the guys that are not going to be playing in the second half of the season either moved on permanently or put out on loan. Now, as I say, it doesn't have to be a development loan. Get them out and play, because otherwise nobody's going to buy them at the end of the season if their contracts extend beyond that, because they're not playing football. It's going to be difficult now, Patrick, to get rid of a guy like James McCarthy, not just because of the wages, which are obviously a stumbling block. It's going to be difficult because he's never kicked a ball. He's played for the B team a couple of times. Same with Siegrist, 2 games. He came to Celtic, he's played 2 games in 18 months. It's going to be hard to convince anybody there isn't something wrong with this goalie. Going, please take him on. He's only making 15 grand a week.
Yeah, it's especially difficult when you look at the form that Joe Hart's been in, and Scott Bain obviously isn't getting a look in either. Hart, he's been a good servant. He's been a decent buy for 1 million. He's obviously leading the dressing room, great character and all that, usual stuff. But it's becoming more and more frequent, the mistakes that he's making. Not coming off his line. Not catching the ball when he can catch the ball. It's a situation that should have been resolved 6 months ago, if not 18 months ago. And Benjamin Siegrist and Scott Bain can't get into that position. So it's obviously an indictment on their performances in training as well. And as you say, it's along with the wages, it's almost impossible to move these guys on. You're just going to have to bite the bullet and pay these guys off at some stage. And John makes a really good point. We're giving these guys long-term deals. It's a good idea if it's a quality player, because then you're maximising the money that you bring in. But if you're just going to give it to everyone, then you're actually saying to people, every signing we make is a quality signing, which obviously isn't true. Definitely isn't true with Mark Lawwell in charge. And on the other end of things, you've got a guy like Turnbull who he's on the sort of perimeter of the squad. He comes on as a sub. He'll sometimes get a start. Decent footballer, just not good enough for the Celtic first team. Could I get some money from him? Could I get maybe 6-7 million? And he's going to walk for free at the end of the season, by the looks of things. So, at both ends of the spectrum, we're quite bad at managing the squad. And when you throw in the fact that we're bad at signing players, it doesn't make for a good mix. And
I think,
I'm not sure about the.
Sorry, I was looking at one of the comments there, and just to your point about the goalkeepers, it was Danielle in the comments there, basically saying how embarrassing it was that we couldn't play either. There we go, backup keeper against Bucky, and how right that is. I mean, that's exactly when you play your backup keepers, isn't it? In the early rounds of cup competitions, and neither of them could be played. I mean, what does that say? That's really shocking.
It is, and I said this yesterday, guys, and I would like to hear your thoughts on it. Jim Monaghan comes in. I think a keeper is our most urgent position. If Hart picks up an injury, we play out the season with Bain. Not good enough if we need to win the league this year. I'll give you in just one scenario. Patrick, I'll start with yourself. We go into the last game against Rangers, and it's as tight as it is right now. Okay, because let's be honest, it's not going to get any easier between now and the end of the season, particularly if we don't bring in the quality. So going into the final game against Rangers in this season, let's say that the points difference is 2 points, and you get that injury to Hart, or to Taylor, or to Kyogo, and you go into that final game, how confident are you, Patrick? How confident are you if one of those positions needs urgent assistance? Because we don't have the quality in the backup, do we?
No, it's far from it, really. And it's not even something that it's probably not something we're prioritising in this window, but probably looking at in the summer. But even at that, it's a year or two late. And as you say, you're one injury away from guys that you blatantly do not trust playing in that position.
No.
I've got very little confidence in all three of the keepers, if I'm being honest. I think Hart's time was up a year ago. And obviously, I've never been a big fan of Scott Bain, and there's obviously an issue with Seacrest because he was brilliant for Dundee United, but he can't get a sniff at Celtic. And luckily, the fourth derby game is at Celtic Park, so I'd be slightly more confident. I'd like to think that we wouldn't lose the game, but you weaken yourself, you shoot yourself in the foot by not acting. I mean, we've got the money, we know what we need to do, and we just seem unable to do it. We're unable to sign good players, we're unable to move on bad players. We just seem stuck almost as if things aren't moving. And it's really hampering, our title charge, because we really should be running away with this. I mean, we were running away with it until we dropped all those points. And when you look at the squad of our closest rivals, and the way that their manager seems to be feeling the pressure now, we really should be running away with it for the second half of this season. And I hope that we do, but we're really not helping ourselves when it comes to squad management, recruitment, transfers, contract lengths. I mean, it does need serious work. And I thought we would at least move on a lot of these guys, but we've known about Kobayashi, Lagerbielka, Bernabe, McCarthy. They've been unwanted for months, and we still can't move them on. And for a lot of these guys, I think they're just going to run down their contracts because I don't see it moving. It's so clear that they're not welcome and they're not going to get played, and yet they're still here.
I'm going to bring this up, and this is not an opportunity for me to try and have a dig at an individual, but it's more of an overview of something that is levied at a Celtic State of Mind, and I'm sure other platforms, on a regular. And I'm bringing it up, Martin, as I say, it's not to have a dig at you, but this is an example of it. Massive negativity and moaning today. I don't know if you mean from the panel or from the commenters. Top of the league and never happy. Years and years of winning, but it's not working in an injury crisis. Unreal. I don't think it's as simple as that, Martin. I'm going to go back to when we didn't win the league under Neil Lennon in his last season when we were going for the 10. On this show, and I can only speak about this show because this is the show I'm focused on, we spoke about that months before the wheels finally came off. Months and months and months before it, because it was as clear to anybody watching what was unfurling in front of your eyes that it wasn't working, and if a change wasn't to happen then, and I'm talking October, then you could have kissed goodbye to 10 in a row. Inevitably, it happened. Everybody's seen it happening. Now, the for me, the opposite is what we've got to avoid. If we were to sit here happy clapping saying, but look at all the money in the bank and we've won all these league titles and we won a treble last season, you're living in the past, you're becoming complacent, you're thinking it's all going to work itself out, and it won't. It absolutely will not work itself out. The squad is completely bloated. We've been inconsistent this season. There's talk of interest in our star player. None of us three are that confident that the board aren't getting excited at that interest. And the carrot at the end of this season is a bigger one than it's ever been. So if you just want to just ignore any kind of issues at the club, then I'm sorry, you're becoming complacent. John, you can't ignore it. And you can't just label it as being any kind of criticism as being negativity. It's not. It's just being realistic with what we are seeing in front of our eyes here.
I've never understood why those people come on these platforms to listen to. If you just want, we could come on for a minute and just say, yay, Celtic, and that'll be us done. Or we can discuss the positives and negatives. We also discuss the positives when it's relevant to the conversation that we're having. At the moment, in the period that we're in, there are concerns and legitimate concerns. And if you don't want to discuss them or don't want to listen to them, that's fine. Nobody's making you. It's just very odd behaviour to assume that we all have to be happy clappy behind the board. Otherwise, it's negative. It's not negative. So I support the team regardless, and support the players as much as possible when they're putting effort in. And essentially, do we criticise the board when we have issues with it? Yes, of course we do. And as to fans of most clubs, I imagine, we certainly have issues with recruitment. I don't think there's any denying that. I don't really understand what the issue is, because all we're doing is talking facts. We're not making anything up. These are the facts. So, and they talk about years and years of winning. Yes, we have, and we want to keep on those years of winning, and we want to progress. So you can't just say, the board want to do nothing except stay one step ahead of Rangers, and then in the same breath say, but there's years and years of winning. Yes, that is a fact. But we want to progress. And this year, in particular, our expectations were not managed by the manager coming in, who made it clear that he was here to see us progress in Europe. And then that just has not emerged at all. Not only did it not emerge, there was no attempt to make it. We're signing guys who are not up to that job. So I just don't understand this. Look, I think I'm a practical person, and I don't think I'm, a happy clapper or a bedwetter. I just think I see the situation as it is. I have an opinion on that situation, and again, but why would you come on here with fake positivity or fake negativity? Either is one thing or the other. So we just. Most people on this platform, in particular this show, have pretty balanced opinions and well-reasoned opinions and well thought out. So not going to be happy clappy for the sake of it, just to keep some commenters on YouTube happy. Do you know what I mean? That's just not because the other thing is, because if anyone has been, we have some very loyal listeners on here, and most of them would know it doesn't matter what you say, because someone's going to disagree with you. You know what I mean? So we get criticised for too positive, too negative, and God forbid you have an opinion on a player.
Just a couple of weeks ago, John. A couple of weeks ago, I was a board apologist. It's like two ends of the spectrum. But what I would say, Patrick, and I've always believed this, and particularly when Celtic fans were unhappy with the way the season was going, when we were going for the 10, we were called entitled, we were called spoiled. We were getting all that thrown at us, right, as fans. And I don't buy into that at all. I think what happens is Celtic fans have demands, and the demands are set based on the standards that have been set by teams, managers, and those in the boardroom previous to that. And that's why we've got success. If you don't have that demand, then you just become another football club that might win the league and might not. We demand that we do. And I don't have an issue with that, Patrick. You demand the absolute best, so that when you get knocked out the League Cup and you think, right, we can't win the treble, of course it's disappointing, but it's not about being entitled or being spoiled. If you're unhappy with that and you want to talk about the reasons as to why we didn't win that particular game. It's just that you've got demands. And I'll tell you what, when players come to this football club, I've spoken about the mentality. A lot of them cannot live up to those demands, and they don't make it at Celtic. But I'd much rather have the demands, Patrick, than just live off past glories. And by the way, last season was a past glory. We're on to this season now, Patrick, and we've got to concentrate on where we are. And it's not all sweetness and light. There are issues with the recruitment, as John says. There are issues within this transfer window, and we've got to discuss them, Patrick. We can't ignore it.
No, I mean, you can't live off past success. What is it Jock Stein said? You need to build up your own legends. I don't know the quote word by word off the top of my head, but, you need to build up your own legends at Celtic Park and all that. And you can't just sit around and go, wasn't last season brilliant? We'll just take this season off. We'll just spend 500 quid on a season ticket, £138 on Champions League, another 20, 40 quid on cup games at home, and we'll just not bother our backside. We can't say, "Oh, that treble was magic 5 years ago." You need to be constantly looking towards the future. And as you rightly point out, that COVID season, I think people got the impression that we were spoiled because we'd lost a couple of games and we're calling for the manager's head, and it's a disaster. I think that's because when you're in a title race and both teams are winning all the time, if you drop a couple of points, it does quickly become a disaster. And we were calling for Neil Lennon's head because you could see all season how bad we were playing, and only then did we start to drop points. And we never really stopped dropping points for the rest of the season, right up until John Kennedy's last game against Hibs at Easter Road. From October to May, we just dropped points constantly, couldn't get a swing of games together. And you're right, we do have standards. We have standards about how good we play, what the results are, we need to win the league. I think the last Celtic manager to survive winning the league was not winning the league, sorry, was Neil Lennon. And you've got to admit, he was very lucky to be in a job, because you look at the rest of his managerial career. So our standards have been set, with the last 60 odd years that we've been the dominant force in Scotland. And I don't think it's, doom and gloom negativity to come on here and say it's been a poor transfer window. The club have stated, the manager has stated, we need several quality players in, and we've only brought one player in. They were talking about moving guys on, and we haven't moved guys on. So, as John says, we're just stating facts. We're unhappy because we know that we can do better. It's not even difficult to do better. It's not like we're trying to reach the moon here. All we're trying to do is move on a few guys who don't play, and it isn't good enough. It's not negative to say it isn't good enough. It isn't good enough. And, as John says, we all have disagreements. We'll often have disagreements on this bulletin, but, that's just the nature of fan media, of Acsom. We're all going to disagree. Not everyone that watches us is going to agree, but we all want the best for Celtic, and that's not happening at the moment. And that's basically the sum total of it, isn't it?
But again, it is, by the way, Patrick, and it's just a different way of disagreeing. I mean, because travelling through to Celtic games on the supporters' buses from Fife all my life, the disagreements to and from the game was part of the experience. Sitting around any member of my family's house when the drink was flowing and the music was playing were disagreements. I remember somebody didn't rate Paul McStay, I won't name them, on the supporters' bus, right? You can imagine the disagreements. And by the way, it's not a dig at Martin Joe. I said that. I qualified that before I even brought it up. I would never bring somebody up just to try and have a dig at them. It's more about this, this sense that you can't criticise the club because you're being negative. You absolutely can. And it's essential that you do, because if you want to meet the standards that have been set before and you want to be a success season on season, it's the only way to do it. And the quote has actually come up as well, Patrick. I'm going to bring it up here. Here we go. I'm going to bring it up. Mikey Boy brings up the quote. We don't want to live with history to be compared with legends from the past. We must make new legends. And it's on Mikey's ex-profile, best quote ever. He was brilliant at doing that, wasn't he, Jock Stein? There's so many. You could have one of the calendars where you tear off the quote a day from Jock Stein just to keep you going. Absolutely brilliant. Thanks. Keep bringing the comments in. We're not having a dig at anybody per se. It's more about that situation where you are going to get on a Celtic State of Mind opinions that are not happy clappy, fully positive, everything's going to be all right, because inevitably they won't be unless you do something about it. Kaiser, you're right. If I did have an in with the board, I'd maybe be allowed to go in and walk round the park. And by the way, if anybody was looking for the wander round Paradise this week, I decided I'm not really built for the bad weather. Don't know if you noticed that. And I don't really like the cold and the wind and the wet. So we didn't do it on Monday, a total cop-out. But we did replace the wander with a very interesting backstage chat with Johan Mjalby. And the first thing you do is you look at how chiselled he is at his age, and you start to reevaluate your lifestyle, don't you, when you look at Johan Mjalby, and you think to yourself, wow, how does he manage that at his age with a couple of hips being replaced and all that kind of stuff? Anyway, it was a very good insight from Johan. He spoke all about the Barcelona victory in 2012. Go and check it out on the channel. All our content is free, of course. AGSC,
I think it's fair to say, Paul John, though, that I'm literally twice the man that Johan Mjalby is.
John, I look at these things, when I'm getting into my advanced years, I look at somebody like Johan and I say, how does somebody like that do it? He's about 10 years older than me, and he is lean.
Yeah. Stop rubbing it in.
I know, right. I'm rubbing it in myself.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, he's old and he's great. He's about the same age as me. Thanks very much, Paul John.
He's old.
Let's move on.
He's an inspiration.
Let's go back to Martin.
Listen, I wanted to bring this up because people think it's my favourite subject on the planet. Listen, I need to discuss it because there's been developments since we discussed it yesterday. In that Rocco Vata's dad did a very interesting interview with Off the Ball, the Irish channel. And I thought he was very honest, John. Very honest indeed. AGSC talks about, I'll put it out there, why not let Vata compete as our second striker? It's a risk, but so is signing someone, though I would take Miovski. Right, I'm going to put it out there. I think we will sign him up. He will get his new deal, and we will immediately loan him out. That's what I think we'll do with Rocco. John, what did you make of the interview yesterday? I'm a big fan of Rudy Vata. People know that because it's just cards on the table, full disclosure. But I try when talking about Rocco to be as balanced as possible. I thought Rudy spoke a lot of sense. And it answered a few questions. It raised a few questions as well, to be fair, but it did answer a few questions about the situation, John.
I didn't think it was a good idea, to be honest with you.
Do you think the club would have sanctioned that? Has that come as a wee bit of a low blower to the club?
I don't think the club would have had anything to do with it. I also don't think it helps that English isn't Rudy's first language. So there are things there from that interview that needed clarified for me. Because if you take what Rudy was saying along with what the manager was saying, and let's be very clear here, the manager, in the way that only a manager can be, was essentially being very critical of Vata in his comments. He mentioned his attitude multiple times, and when you compare that with the way that he spoke about the other young fella, it was very clear that he's got a problem with his attitude. And then then you've got Rudy going on there and talking about me. He can dream and he can do this, and he wants to, if he wants to move on to, Barcelona or Real Madrid or whatever he wants to move on to, but he's got to do what the manager says. And you're just like, that sounds to me like a fairly fatal combination of lofty ambition and lack of application. So I think, to me anyway, I think that interview was a mistake because it sounds like the boy's a dreamer, and it sounds like he's not. From what the manager was saying, it sounds like he's not putting the work in. So, and that's as about as explicit as Brendan has ever got in terms of his thoughts on a player. He's got a lot of work to do, etc., etc. If I was hearing that from my manager, I'd shut my mouth and get my head down and go on with my job. And I think he really needs to knuckle down. If he gets another deal with the club, I think that's his best option, because if that's his attitude, he's going to go elsewhere and disappear fast. And I think he really, we can only go on the comments that have been made. So his dad, I think, gave away a bit of his mentality, and the manager gave away quite a lot about his attitude in terms of his application. So I don't think it's a good combination. I think he'll be lucky to get another deal with the club, and if he does, I think that's his best option.
It's one of the ones, there's a bit of ambiguity, like John said, about what Rudy says. It must be a nightmare, Patrick, right? Because it's like the club obviously wouldn't have sanctioned it and then Rudy can say what he likes. He's not Rocco's agent, but he's giving his opinions. But then people are going to look at every nuance of what Rudy said. On the one hand, he dreams to play for one of the top clubs in Europe, and on the other hand, even when the manager's wrong, he's right. You're right, but you shouldn't even think about the manager being wrong. You're 18 years of age. You do what you're told. If you get a wee sniff at the first team, you apply yourself as well as you possibly can. I think the best thing for the club right now would be get the guy signed up and then loan him out and put him out there and get him some game time in those legs. That's a better standard of team and league than the Lowland, Patrick. And then, the proof's in the pudding at that stage, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think attitude is probably the issue. I mean, obviously, I don't know the guy. We don't know what he's like in his personal life or in training or anything like that. But I heard Rodgers' comments on, I think it was BBC Scotland after the Bucky Thistle game, and it's what John's saying. He was very complimentary of Daniel Kelly, but he was saying, if he works hard, there is a structure here for Rocco to succeed. Which the indication being he's not working hard at the moment,
Yeah.
and he can go elsewhere if he likes, but if he's got that same attitude, then it's obviously not going to happen. He might think, oh, I'm at Celtic, I'm doing brilliant, and I don't need to work hard, and I can succeed elsewhere, but if you go elsewhere and you don't work hard, you won't succeed there either. I mean, just look at Karamoko Dembele. The guy had the world at his feet, left because he wasn't happy with his game time, and now he's not getting game time because he's not good enough. And this was meant to be one of the best youngsters in the world. I'm sure there are other people, who have came through the Celtic youth system who are they think that they're doing really well. They've been at Celtic for ages. They're absolutely brilliant. They've been told that they're brilliant from a very young age, and then you end up with a guy like Mikey Johnson who's almost 25, and he's done absolutely nothing with his career. He had a wee purple patch where he scored a few goals for Celtic, and all of a sudden he's 25, and he's done next to nothing. It's 4 last chance saloons in a row for Mikey Johnson. And I'm not saying he's full of himself or whatever, but I think if these guys don't knuckle down and don't give their absolute best, and they're not going to make it at Celtic, never mind Real Madrid or Barcelona. And I think it's a bit of a fatal combination, as John says, when you get big dreams but no work ethic, because you're going to get nowhere fast.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'm going to chip in there. You've mentioned Dembele. Dembele he was that wonder kid, wasn't he? Made his debut at 16, played in Europe. Everybody just thought that progress would happen, and it didn't. And there is no guarantee, Patrick. The ability is part of it. You need luck as well, and you need the attitude and the application, which is massive. And I remember, I keep saying this because people say, youth development pays for itself, etc., etc. But John and I, we had a massive conversation last year about it. And there are deep concerns, about it. There was a scenario I'm going to share with you, actually. This was quite a few years ago. And believe it or not, it was through writing my book that I wrote 11 years ago now. It was released. I've got a contact in Vic Davidson, who was in America, used to play for Celtic. And he contacted us and said, I've got this youngster who I have never seen a player with this level of potential. I have never seen him in my life, a player of this potential. Bear in mind, Vic Davidson came through with Kenny Dalglish. So he played with a few decent players. And can you get him in at Celtic? Because a wee bit like Kaiser there. If I had an in at Celtic, I'd be walking about the place rather than outside. I probably wouldn't actually. I quite enjoy the wonder. However, I did manage, believe it or not, this is true, right, a true story, through a contact of mine to get the young guy a trial with Celtic, believe it or not. And I think the big thing was, it was Vic Davidson, former Celtic player. They paid to get the kid over, because Vic's in Oregon, right? Paid to get him over, John. 2-week trial. They had him living in a Purple Palace, one of the Premier Inns near to the ground, right? And the kid, I don't know, 15, 16 years of age. I'm looking at him thinking to myself, I couldn't have done that at that age. I could not have flown to the other side of the world and done what this boy's doing. But I went through and seen him a couple of times at night because he was a bit bored and all that. And he was talking about the team that he was training with, right? The actual Celtic team that he was training with. And the guy at the heart of the academy at that point was Tommy McIntyre, who's now at Queen's Park. And he was talking about the players. And the only one, actually, Kelleher was in that team, whose brother plays and goals for Liverpool, who we might be interested in. And Jack Aitchison was in that team. But not one of them made it at Celtic. Not one of that group of players made it at Celtic. And you've seen them going about as if they were professional footballers. Like they had made it, John. You've seen it. Every nuance of their being was, I'm a professional footballer and I play with Celtic. Not one of them made it. Not one of them made it.
Can I just add to that? And I think everyone's got a story like this. My brother was an athlete, but he did briefly play for Celtic Boys Club. And in that Celtic Boys Club team, there were some absolutely fantastic players. You watch the team, these guys that stood out, country mile, they stood out, and they were absolutely sensational. The only one of them that went on to play professionally was Chris McCart, and who was just like pretty much the least talented guy on the pitch at that point. And it's all, again, there's a certain level. You need to have certain physical attributes, right? You need to have be blessed with the genetics. That's a start. But there's plenty of guys that are. But what it takes, especially in the modern game, what it takes to be a pro player at a high level is a level of discipline that most people are just not capable of.
No.
And I know I wouldn't be. The discipline you need is really sensational in terms of, it's just levels most of us can't dream of in terms of, the sacrifices you have to make. Your social life is just non-existent. You can't eat what you want, drink what you want. You just can't do anything like that. Your entire life is dominated by football, and you have to love it. You have to love every bit of it, because if you don't love the hard bits, you're never going to make it.
24/7 thing, isn't it? I found it interesting. Matt Riley was talking about it was a mentality shift, and that is why he is performing so well this season. He spoke about having a coach, like a life coach, who's based in India, and he speaks to him about getting into the right frame of mind. I was just waiting for him to say state of mind, but he didn't. But it just shows you, John, it's 24/7 where you're tuned in up here. Every single thing you put into your body has to be geared towards being that athlete that you were talking about. And groups and groups of players and all their peers, and not one of them made it from that group of players. And that happens a lot, not just at Celtic, right across Europe, right across the globe. So when you get one player, and we're talking about Vata, who seems to be a standout, you want him to do well. Whether he does or not, we shall wait and see. But I think, personally, sign him up and then loan him out, and then he's still your player, get him on a deal and loan him out, get him some game time. Listen, thank you all for your comments. Martin, thank you for your comment. It gives us a lot to talk about when you come in with your point of view on all things Celtic. Well over 1,000 live this Wednesday afternoon. Hopefully by this time tomorrow, there will be some movement in and out of the club, and hopefully anybody that leaves isn't Carter, Vickers, Abado or O'Reilly. Thanks, every single one of you. Thank you to Patrick. I was going to call you Maguire. That's my cousin. Patrick McGilp and John Hughes for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Hail, hail.